America has a new weapon, one that nobody could see but everyone felt. The U.S. raid to capture Nicolás Maduro was a calculated strike that brought down the head of a regime in a matter of hours. But Operation Absolute Resolve wasn't just a mission, it was a demonstration. As the specialized Delta Force teams moved through the Venezuelan capital of Caracas, the usual noise of war was missing. There were no bombs falling, no cannons firing, and almost no regular gunfights. Instead, top-secret tech that nobody would talk about changed how people fought. It used invisible waves to shut down the human body, leaving hundreds of loyal Maduro guards helpless, confused, and bleeding from their ears and noses, all before a single American boot even hit the ground. Witnesses claimed to be the victims of a powerful device during the raid, one that they likened to an intense sound wave that left defenders collapsed on the ground and suffering severe symptoms. Venezuelan personnel said it felt as if their heads were under extreme pressure, like their skulls were being squeezed from the inside. Some later said that it felt as if the air itself had turned hostile. These claims spread like wildfire online and they were amplified across social media platforms. They gained enough attention, they were mentioned publicly by the White House press secretary. Despite this, U.S. authorities never officially confirmed the deployment of any such technology, leaving the account suspended in a gray zone between testimony and denial. And that certainly only made it more frightening. Since 2019, the CIA has been busy working behind the scenes. They obtained prized intelligence from defectors and used satellites to watch silently. They even made secret deals with neighbors in Colombia to map every single escape tunnel under the palace. Washington didn't just want him, they had spent years squeezing the life out of his world. Sanctions had collapsed the country's economy. Families fled across the borders by the millions, leaving behind ghost towns. The raid wasn't just a sudden choice, it was the last act of a long-term fight. Grabbing Maduro was a cold surgical mission. Every second was timed to a heartbeat. Every move was planned. And long before anyone could fight back, Caracas went blind. 150 planes, a deadly mix of F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs, and B-1B Lancers headed for the capital. The F-22s used special skins to evade radar, while the F-35s pulled a web of data from the ground. Electronic pods jammed every radio in the city, turning Venezuelan comms into static. Deep in the bunkers in Virginia, computers had run 1,000 tests to predict exactly how the defenses would react. There they sat, invisible to the Russian-made S-300 defense systems that Maduro had used as a safety net for years. Within minutes, the U.S. Air Force had locked down the entire northern coast of Venezuela, turning the sky into a dead zone. Maduro was already a prisoner in his own home before the first bang was heard in the city. The first move of the fight relied on a missile that had only been ready for a few weeks, the long-range hypersonic weapon, or Dark Eagle. This wasn't just a new rocket, it was the result of billions of dollars and years of work to beat tech from China and Russia. Fired from mobile trucks hidden in secret spots, 3 missiles didn't just fly, they screamed through the top of the sky. Moving at over Mach 5, nearly 4,000 miles per hour, the Dark Eagle was an unstoppable force. Regular radar is built to track things that move in a simple curve, but the Dark Eagle moves wildly, skipping across the edge of space. It is a precision-guided hell that could vaporize a target without damaging the house next door. By the time the radar crews at Fuerte Tiuna saw the danger, it was over. In under 10 minutes, the missiles had slammed into the defense batteries, turning the pride of Maduro's military into heaps of scrap metal. Survivor stories from the radar techs describe blips that looked like ghosts, with alarms going off only as the horizon turned orange. There were no sirens and no time to run, just a sudden giant crack in the sky followed by the total loss of Venezuela's protection. Leaked satellite pictures and shaky videos started popping up on X and Instagram. People all over the world shared flashes of the hits, and the hashtag Maduro raid was everywhere before the first American soldier had even stepped out of a helicopter. The attack happened in the real world and on the screen at the same time. Even as the fire rained down, the true nightmare was about to begin. People who survived the raid spoke about a kind of horror that didn't make sense. This wasn't a normal firefight, it was a mass shutdown of the human body. The soldiers weren't hit by bullets, they were hit by the air. A Venezuelan guard said there was a moment where hundreds of soldiers were ready to fight, holding their guns tight and looking through the smoke, and suddenly the world felt thick, like the air had turned heavy. After the radar network was gone, a swarm of drones appeared over the sky. These weren't normal drones. They were emitters built to hit people with a narrow band of pulsed energy designed to disrupt the human nervous system. The waves target the inner ear, making the head feel like it's exploding from the inside, a brutal trick that leaves people staggering. Moments later, a group of helicopters landed, and soldiers moved into position. In normal combat conditions, a handful of men against hundreds would be over in minutes. But these weren't normal soldiers, and this wasn't a normal fight. US troops didn't even need to hide because their enemies couldn't move. The Venezuelan guard talked about the Thing, a weapon that didn't just make a noise, it made his skin crawl. Hundreds of men doubled over, unable to even scream. The guards weren't shooting back, they were on their knees, holding their heads and vomiting. Some were even bleeding from their nose. Others were expected to have brain fog for weeks, similar to the victims of Havana syndrome. The ground was covered with men who couldn't stand, their insides shaking so fast they couldn't even think. The US had weaponized the air. To understand what happened in Caracas, you have to understand something that most people don't even believe is real: directed energy weapons. The goal isn't to kill you, it's to shut you down. For decades, militaries quietly experimented with acoustic and directed energy weapons, searching for ways to control enemies without firing bullets. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union explored infrasound, or low-frequency vibrations capable of inducing panic, nausea, and confusion. Early tests were inconsistent, but they proved the human body could be disrupted without physical contact. Later, systems like acoustic cannons were deployed openly for crowd control, blasting focused sound to cause pain and force dispersal. What happened in Caracas appeared to be the next step, removing the noise, increasing the precision, and turning the pressure and vibration into an invisible weapon that acted directly on the nervous system. The US military had been working on this in the dark for years, spending billions in labs to see how waves can spike pressure inside the skull. Since the 1990s, they have run tests on animals and used people in Nevada deserts to see how the brain reacts to energy. The specific effect used in Caracas is called the fry effect. This is when radio waves make people hear sounds in their own head, even though there is no speaker, headphones, or electronic device involved. And at a military level, this isn't just a sound, it is a total attack on the senses. High-power waves can go through the skull and hit the brain, heating it up by a few degrees in seconds. This moves ions in the body and causes small blood vessels in the nose to pop, which is why the guards were bleeding. At the same time, the energy messes with the body's balance system. The brain gets so confused by the pressure and the signals that it makes the person get violently sick. It puts the human body at a war with itself, a secret arms race that nations have been playing since the Cold War. What made the weapon so effective wasn't just the pain, it was the confusion. Soldiers trained for gunfire and explosions suddenly found themselves unable to stand, unable to focus, and unable to communicate. Units collapsed without understanding why. No alarms warned them, no obvious source revealed itself. The battlefield had shifted from something you could see and something you could hear to something you could only feel. By the time they realized what was happening, resistance was already over. While the sound waves held the base still, Delta Force teams were moving fast toward Maduro's home. This was the end of months of intelligence gathering, using drones that can see heat and even hacking into smartwatches to see when Maduro was sleeping. The US knew everything about his routine. In the US, teams had practiced the raid on a life-size model of the building, learning every hallway and light switch. They knew exactly how many steps it took to get to the bedroom. The soldiers didn't use normal tools, they used silent plasma cutters that melted through steel doors without even making a spark. Maduro had a safe room made of thick steel, built to survive a hit from a tank. He thought that even if the Americans breached the compound, he could wait them out. He was wrong. Maduro made it to the safe room, but he was unable to close the door. By 4:20 a.m., the leader of life was being walked to a helicopter in handcuffs. His wife was taken too. The man who ran the country was just a prisoner. The flight out was a high-speed chase with helicopters dodging old missiles while doctors gave Maduro shots to keep him quiet. There was no big hero moment and no giant shootout, just a quiet professional capture that ended a decade of power. By sunrise, Maduro was already being processed on a US Navy ship in the middle of the ocean. The strongman's reign ended in a flash, but the real trial was only just beginning on American soil. On January 5, 2026, the world saw something that seemed impossible just days before. Nicolás Maduro stood in a courtroom in Manhattan. The fancy suits were gone, replaced by a plain orange jumpsuit. He looked pale and confused, maybe still feeling the effects of the sound weapon on his brain. The reaction from other countries was a mix of anger and total fear. Russia and China said the raid was a clear break of international law, but behind closed doors, their military experts were probably panicking, trying to figure out how their best defenses were beaten so easily. Russia started rushing its own hypersonic weapons, and China began to look at how to eliminate the satellites the US used for the raid. The world finally understood that technology once dismissed as disruptive had crossed a line. What began as tools for crowd control and psychological pressure had evolved into weapons capable of toppling governments without leveling cities. Modern warfare has entered the age of the invisible threat. Borders still exist on maps, but the battlefield has slipped into something harder to see. A world of waves, signals, and silent pulses. And once these weapons are proven to work, they don't stay secret for long. As one guard warned with chilling simplicity, "You have no idea what they can do." If the US is already using secret weapons in Venezuela, the next step could be even darker. Watch This Is What a Full Invasion of Venezuela Would Look Like to see how fast it could spiral into an all-out war. Or click on this video instead.